All right, so today we are doing a deep dive on, well, knowledge, how we create it, how we share it, all that good stuff.
Really, really important stuff.
Exactly. And the inspiration for this deep dive is this super thought-provoking article from the Stanford Social Innovation Review. It's called Decolonize Civil Society Research.
Which, right off the bat, might sound a little academic, maybe.
Yeah, maybe a little jargony. But trust me, this article is for everyone because at its core, it's about challenging the way we think about knowledge, period.
It really is. In fact, the article kicks off with this anecdote, almost like a scene from a movie. Picture this. Researchers at a conference presenting their findings on, well, civil society in the Global South.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Everyone's nodding along, everything seems on track,
But
until
what?
one person in the audience, this practitioner from East Africa, speaks up and just completely flips the script. They basically say, hold on a minute, you're all here studying us, talking about us, but where are we in all of this?
Whoa.
Right, it's kind of a mic drop moment.
Right.
And the article goes on to explain that this question, as simple as it sounds, gets at something really profound. This idea of decolonizing research. Who gets to ask the research questions in the first place? Whose knowledge is seen as valuable? And ultimately, who gets to shape the narrative about different parts of the world?
It's about power dynamics, plain and simple.
Exactly. And what's so interesting is the article isn't saying, okay, researchers from the global north, you're out. You can't study the global south anymore. It's much more nuanced than that.
So it's not about exclusion, then what is it about?
It's about recognizing the flaw in relying solely on the perspectives of, let's say, researchers based in the global north when trying to understand the complexities of the global south.
Okay, so can you give me an example of what that might look like in practice?
Sure. Think about it like this. Imagine you're trying to understand this entire solar system, right? But you're only allowed to look at, say, Mars.
Okay, I see where you are going with this.
You might learn a lot about Mars, sure, but you're missing out on this whole universe of information and perspectives from all the other planets.
Right. And that brings us to this whole concept of extractive research.
Exactly. Which, by the way, is a term we hear a lot these days, so let's unpack that a bit.
Yeah, please do. Because I feel like sometimes these academic terms can feel kind of vague. What does extractive research actually mean?
Sure, so imagine data, like people's lived experiences, their traditions, the unique challenges they face. Imagine all of that as this valuable resource.
Okay, I like that. Data as a resource.
Right. And a lot of times, that resource is being mined from the global south through interviews, surveys, observations, all of that. But then often, that data is shipped off to universities and research institutions in the global north.
Where it's analyzed, packaged, published, often without much benefit flowing back to the communities who shared their knowledge in the first place.
Exactly. And the thing is, it's not always about bad intentions or malice. Right?
Right.
It's about recognizing that even with the best of intentions, researchers from a certain background or with a certain worldview, they might miss things simply because they're looking through their own specific lens.
It's like we talk about bias in the news and media, but it's easy to forget that even research, something that's supposed to be objective, can be influenced by the researcher's background.
Absolutely. And that bias, whether we're aware of it or not, it can have real-world consequences.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. Policies are made, funding decisions happen, all based on research finding.
Exactly. So if those findings are skewed, even slightly, because of this limited perspective, then the solutions, the interventions, they might not be as effective as they could be.
It's like trying to solve a problem with only half the puzzle pieces, right? You might see part of the picture, but you're missing crucial information.
100%. And that's why I think this whole conversation about decolonizing research, it's not just some abstract academic debate. It's about making sure that the knowledge we're producing is actually, well, useful.
Right. Knowledge that reflects the full picture, not just a narrow slice of it. So, okay, we've talked about the problems with the traditional research model, this whole extractive approach, but what's the alternative? How do we actually go about decolonizing research? What does that even look like in practice?
Well, the authors of this article, they offer a really interesting framework. They call it the 3 pillars of decolonizing research. And I think these pillars, they provide a really practical roadmap for researchers who are serious about making a change.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. Lay it on me. What are these 3 pillars?
So pillar number 1 is something called critical reflexivity.
Okay, I'll admit, that sounds a little intimidating.
It's a mouthful, I know.
Yeah.
But it's actually a pretty simple idea. It's basically about self-awareness. Like, researchers need to be really honest with themselves about their own biases, their own assumptions about the world.
So before you even start a research project, you're taking a step back and asking yourself, okay, what am I bringing to the table here? And how might that be influencing the way I'm approaching this research?
Exactly. It's like checking your blind spots before you even start driving.
Love that analogy. So that's pillar one. What about pillar number two?
Pillar two is all about radical equality. And this one's really important because it gets at the heart of power dynamics in research.
Okay, unpack that a little for me. What do you mean by radical equality?
So it's not just about including people from different backgrounds in your research. It's about making sure those voices are heard, like truly heard, throughout the entire research process.
From designing the study all the way to interpreting the results and sharing the findings.
Absolutely. It's about shifting power dynamics, not just, ticking boxes on a diversity checklist.
It's about making sure everyone has an equal seat at the table.
Exactly. And then the third pillar, this is all about reciprocal feedback.
Reciprocal feedback. Okay, break that down for me. What does that mean in the context of research?
Basically, it's about making sure that research is a two-way street. So often, researchers come in, collect data, and then disappear.
Right. So unfortunately, it happens way too often.
Right. But with reciprocal feedback, it's about engaging with the communities you're studying throughout the entire process, like getting their input on the research questions, making sure the findings are shared back in a way that's understandable and useful to them.
So it's not just about extracting information, it's about giving back, sharing knowledge, and making sure the research actually benefits the communities involved.
Exactly. And what's really cool is that the authors of this article, they're not just preaching this stuff from their ivory tower. They're actually putting these principles into practice in their own work.
Oh, really? Like how?
Well, for example, they always use alphabetical authorship to challenge those traditional hierarchies in academia.
Oh, interesting. So it's not always about who did the most work, it's about making sure everyone gets equal credit.
Exactly. And they also make a point of publishing their research in more accessible venues, not just those big-name academic journals that are hidden behind paywalls. They want to make sure their work is actually reaching a wider audience.
I love that. It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. But of course, changing the way research is done, it's not always easy. It comes with its own set of challenges, right?
Yeah, I'm sure it's not always smooth sailing. What are some of the hurdles that researchers might encounter when they're trying to implement these principles?
Well, for one thing, it takes more time, right? Like building genuine relationships with communities, navigating different cultural contexts, ensuring that everyone feels heard and respected. It's just more complex than, the traditional fly in, collect data, fly out approach.
It definitely sounds more labor intensive, but I imagine the payoff is worth it, right? Like, what are the rewards of actually approaching research in this more inclusive, equitable way?
Oh, there are so many. I mean, first and foremost, you get better research.
Better in what sense?
Well, when you have people from different backgrounds, different experiences, all contributing to the research process, you get this much richer, more nuanced understanding of whatever it is you're studying. And that leads to, more effective solutions, more impactful policies, funding decisions that actually make sense.
So it's not just about doing research the right way, ethically speaking. It's about making sure the knowledge we're producing is actually valuable and useful.
Exactly. But it goes even deeper than that, honestly. Decolonizing knowledge is about building bridges between cultures, fostering genuine understanding, creating a more equitable system for how knowledge is produced and shared.
It's about recognizing that knowledge isn't this one-size-fits-all thing.
Right. There are so many ways of knowing and experiencing the world.
Hmm.
And those different ways, they all have value.
I love that. So we've been talking a lot about researchers and how they can decolonize their work. But I think it's important to bring this back to our listeners because this isn't just about academia, is it?
Not at all.
So for someone who's listening to this, no matter what their field is, what their passions are, what are some ways they can start to apply these principles of decolonizing knowledge in their own lives?
That's such a great question. And it's something we should all be thinking about constantly, really. Like, whose voices am I listening to? Am I seeking out diverse perspectives? Am I questioning my own assumptions about the world?
It's like, what would it take to make your own information diet a little more, well, inclusive?
Yes, a little more representative of the incredible diversity of thought and experience that's out there.
Love that. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Food for thought, right?
Absolutely.
We hope this deep dive has given you some new ways of thinking about knowledge, about research, about how we make sense of the world around us.
It's a lifelong journey for sure, this whole decolonizing knowledge thing, but it's a journey worth taking.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep those minds open, keep asking those tough questions, and keep exploring.